Welcome, everyone, to the podcast of Tapping In, where we tap into the wisdom and experience of successful leaders. Today, we have Dana Kirchmar joining us, and she is going to share her background and her wisdom. Dana, thank you so much. How about telling us a little bit about your background, how you got into your current business? And I think that would be a great place for us to start.
Sure. Thank you. And thanks for having me, Gwen. So I'm an electrical engineer by degree, and I've spent my entire 37-year career in aviation and aerospace. So basically starting out at Martin Marietta, working on a classified spacecraft, and got to be part of sitting in mission control, calling go or no go for my system for the very first classified space shuttle launch. So it tells you how long ago it was. It's been a while since we've had space shuttle launches, but it was the very first classified one. And I moved from aerospace into aviation, which I absolutely love. I've spent most of my career in aviation working on avionics and autopilots. I was one of the only people on my team that didn't get sick flight testing, so I got to do all of the autopilot flight testing, which meant I got to do some interesting maneuvers and do some things at very high speeds. I've actually flown to 0.97 Mach standing up in the cockpit of a Citation 10. So that
Wow.
was pretty exciting. So at this point in my career, I am really wanting to give back to the industries that I love. And primarily, I want to do that for women. I'm on a mission to exponentially increase the number of women in aviation and aerospace. Right now, women are less than 6% of the C-level roles in aviation and aerospace, and only 25% of the entire employed community. So it's been in the news a lot that there's a pipeline issue. You hear it a lot in regard to pilots and how we're having pilot shortages, but it's really a workforce shortage across the board in aviation and aerospace. So I'm working on filling the pipeline. I'm working to coach young women, to give them strategies for how to thrive in a male-dominated industry. And then I'm actually working with the male CEOs, trying to get them to understand the stories of women in aviation and aerospace and how they can make their companies more culturally favorable for women to stick around.
That's awesome. I love the fact that you're kind of creating a greater path for women in this industry. I think that's
Right.
really marvelous.
Thank
So
you.
I know you've had some really big wins as you've been on this path, either in your previous career or in your current ventures. Can you share some wins with us, like things that have gone very well for you and how that came about?
Yeah, I think one of my favorite jobs in my career was actually working for a startup aircraft manufacturer. So it's pretty unusual for an aircraft to be a from scratch design. Usually they'll take the body, the fuselage of one aircraft and change the wing or change the tail, and they'll call it a new airplane. But I had the opportunity to work on a from scratch airplane that the founders of our company actually designed. We went to the wind tunnel to make sure everything was going to work the way it was supposed to work out all of the aerodynamics. And we actually, at the time that I joined that company, I was the 17th employee. And at the time that we actually built the aircraft, there were only 35 of us. So on the day of first flight, I was asked to be on the headset with the flight test pilot. And, the plane had never taken off. We had no idea whether it would. We had a pretty good idea that it would after all the testing that we did. But so getting to be on the headphones with him on the first flight was really pretty spectacular. And I don't think I will offend anybody because I've never been married and I don't have children, and so I feel like that was actually one of the very best days of my life, truthfully.
Yeah. That's so exciting to see something that you helped create come to fruition. So it is kind
Absolutely.
of like creating a baby, like
Yeah.
you work towards it, you put effort into it, and suddenly it blossomed and bloomed, and you got to
Right.
be part of all of those stages up to that
Exactly.
point. That's really wonderful. It's
Yeah.
so great to be in that creative process.
Absolutely. That really felt like a project where I got to use both sides of my brain.
Mhm.
It was just like the most fun monster garage project you could ever work on, and then to watch it fly was pretty
Yeah,
spectacular.
yeah. So that's one of those projects that there are certain goals and steps that you go up the ladder, right? Do we achieve
Right.
this? Then we've got to achieve that. We've got to achieve that. But in the
Absolutely.
process, that creative brain of being more awakened to how things are working and is this going to work or not work, and just exploring all the potential outcomes and all of
Right.
that. So it's
Right.
very clear steps, and then also exploring potentialities that you may
Right.
not have thought about ahead of time. I hear this a
Exactly.
lot in space industry, right? Where people
Yeah.
are very specific in their goals, but also have these other things that are unknown
Yeah.
and we have to explore. So it keeps us on our toes and keeps the excitement building too, I think.
It does. I just watched the new documentary on Apollo 13, and it was so interesting what they had to go through there. You have plans and you have a step-by-step a checklist that you go through, but
Right.
then it's the other things that you don't expect, that you don't have a checklist for, that you have to use the creative side of your brain to come up with something, kind of like what they're going through right now with the astronauts who are stuck up in the space station. So they're having to do some creative thinking up there right now too.
Yeah. Yeah, that's so wishing them all well too. So live down here
Absolutely.
in the space industry
Yeah,
area, so I hear about all of these
I'll
things.
bet you do.
Awesome. So tell me what challenges you have faced either in your previous career or the venture that you're pursuing right now. And if there are any challenges that you faced that stood out to you that helped you develop some strength and resilience. I know a lot of our listeners are looking for how do I manage the strength and resilience to get through this challenge, or how do I manage this challenge so that I come out of it with more strength and resilience? So, can you share anything along those lines?
Absolutely. So, 30 years into my career, I was fired from out of the blue.
Mm,
I had no idea it was coming. I, to this day, have no idea why I was fired. I have some ideas, but nothing that I'm allowed to talk about. Anyway, and I had given my entire life to my career. As I said earlier, I didn't have children. I hadn't gotten married. I really had given everything to my career. And I felt like I had to, because I felt like I had to prove myself, being a woman in such a male dominated industry. And I can remember going to a friend's house and like just being devastated. It wasn't being the an electrical engineer and an aerospace engineer wasn't just what I did. It was who I was. It was like that was what my whole identity was wrapped up in. And she was trying to cheer me up and trying to, make me feel better about things. And she said, what do you do for fun? And I couldn't come up with anything. And she said, how do you spend your spare time? And I couldn't come up with anything. And it was really excuse me, excuse me 1 second. It was really an opportunity for me to reset and change how I lived my life from that way forward. And I will tell you that I really did change the way that I look at my life now. So I basically check. I have this routine that I do at the very beginning of the year, where I plan out the year very specifically by the quarter, and at the end of each quarter I go in and look and see, hey, am I close to this? Do I need to reset something? Are there other things that I should be thinking about? So that and I try to teach that to the young women that I coach as well, so that they don't end up where I ended up, in a place where I had no control over what was coming next. And so it gave me an opportunity to go back and remember what I love to do, that I love to snow ski, that I love to play the piano, that I love to read books, that I love to do things with my friends. I love going to sporting events, especially baseball games. And so it was an opportunity for me to take a good look and figure out who I was versus who I had become, because I really had shape shifted into something that I didn't even recognize. It was just somebody who was the worker,
Yeah.
and my career was who I was, and
Mhm.
I lost track of everything. So
Yeah. Yeah. That brings up a good point. A lot of people get their identity wrapped up in what they do for a living. And
absolutely.
the passion's there, it's great, but your whole identity as a human can't really be totally wrapped up into that. There
Right.
needs to be another side. There
Yep.
needs to be something that you're passionate about, that you're engaged in, that you embrace outside of work. It's interesting because you actually show up better at work when you have this other side to yourself.
You do,
You
definitely.
can be more engaged and more productive when you have outside activities and interests. So
Yeah.
that's a good point. I love how you took the loss of a job and really stepped back, like it was a wake up call for you as an individual, not just a wake up call for you professionally, like
Right.
you need to shift, you need to do something different professionally, but you also took it as a call to make life better
Right.
for yourself individually and personally.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I became much more mindful. I meditate on a daily basis. I have a morning routine that I go through now. Before I even walk
Awesome.
into my office, I journal, I go for a walk, I do my meditation. I it has completely changed my mindset. I look at nothing as a failure anymore. I look at an issue as an opportunity or a gift, and that's how I've built up my resilience. Is okay. This may feel really bad right now in this moment, but let's sit down and take 10 minutes and write what are the possible gifts to come out of this situation.
Yeah, yeah, beautiful, beautiful. I love seeing people notice the gifts and
Yeah,
not just seeing the negative, because almost every tragedy that we have in our life can lead to an opportunity as well.
absolutely,
Yeah,
absolutely.
that's a beautiful piece of wisdom. So thank you for sharing that.
Sure, sure.
Any other wisdom or thoughts that you feel like you'd like to share with the audience on growing and developing a new business or coming out of tragedy into something great? What would you like to share?
So one of the biggest lessons that I've learned in my life, and it was very silly at the time, but it's meant a lot to me down the road, and it's probably the biggest piece of advice that I give to anyone. And it is it happened over a flight jacket. So when I was working at Honeywell, the team that I was working on was Cessna, and there was another team working on the Embraer jet. And the Embraer guys would come into the office every day with their matching Embraer jackets on, and they looked like a team, and we were always grumbling to our boss about, oh, why do they get jackets and we don't feel like a team and blah blah blah. And one day we were actually at Cessna for a meeting, and I came back, and I was the manager at the time, and I came back to my hotel room, and on my bed in a wrapped package was a Cessna flight jacket with a sticky note on it that said, sometimes all you have to do is ask. And that has really been my going forward, is if you don't ask for what you want, nobody's going to know what it is you want. And people aren't going to magically read your mind and hand you what you want. You need to be an advocate for yourself and ask for specifically what you want. And I know it's silly over a flight jacket, but it really, I mean, I still have that sticky note. And remind myself sometimes all you have to do is ask.
Yeah, that's great. Well, that's wonderful. That's wonderful. I love hearing that. And I love the fact that you joined me today. I'm
Well,
super
thank you.
excited about it. It was such a pleasure talking to you before we scheduled this podcast.
Yeah,
And I hope other people take the opportunity to talk to you as well. Uh,
thank you.
I look forward to hearing how things go with all the people that you coach and
Thank
how
you.
you are supporting and encouraging women in the field of aviation.
Thank
So
you.
I think it's super exciting. So thank you so much for joining me today. And thank you to all of our listeners for joining us as we tap into the wisdom and experience of successful leaders.